Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're listening. We are When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast about censorship in the arts. My name is Todd Sullivan. That guy over there is Oren Barter.
That's me.
And today, we are not talking about the autobiography of Malcolm X. Welcome back, Oren. It's good to be sitting here with you again.
Yeah, you too.
Sharing our virtual space. It'll be weird if we ever do this recording face-to-face in person. I don't know how I would feel about that.
Well, after COVID, I think everything's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah. Assuming there is an after COVID.
Oh, yeah, there'll be an after COVID.
That's a pretty big assumption these days.
No. There was an after the Spanish flu. There was an after the measles. There was an after polio. There's an after this.
You're so optimistic. I really appreciate that in my life right now. What's going on in your life these days?
Well, same as last time. Been trying to lose some weight. I think I'm down to 167 now, which is good. And in the spirit of low calories, which you introduced me to with low calorie beer for, I don't know if you want it open that you're a diabetic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I have no problem about that. I think I mentioned that last time anyway.
Oh, okay. So I remember I came over to visit you once and you were worried about your calorie intake, so you had Sleem and Clear, and it's pretty good. So that's what I got tonight. Yeah,
that's it wasn't, I mean, calories for one thing, but also carbs primarily, which can be kind of hefty in beer.
Oh, okay.
But a can of Sleem and Clear only has 2 grams of carbs.
Holy shit, you're right.
Yeah.
80 calories. So that's like all alcohol. Like all the calories are pretty much alcohol.
Pretty much, yeah. One of my new sort of low carb beer that I've been drinking is it's called Steamworks Refresh, and it's like a light beer with little hints of fruit juice and fruit puree, and it only has 3 grams. It's not chunky.
Okay.
It's not like
when they say puree, I imagine like a smoothie.
Yeah, but I don't think there's very much in there.
Okay.
Right? And they've only got 3 grams of carbs per can, so a little bit more than the Sleem and Clear, but still not very much. Like, for example, this is guava lime, and so along with the water, malt, hops, yeast, and sea salt, it has guava puree and lime concentrate. So that gets you that little bit of fruity flavor without a whole lot of carbohydrate to go along with it. And I quite like these. They're quite refreshing. And since I'm a fan of sours, these give me a bit of that kind of an experience without, a big, heavy, carby beer.
So there's like no low carb rattlers out there?
I don't know that there would be, because the whole concept of a rattler is that it's half juice, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that juice is going to be pretty carby.
Can't you just like get beer and get like one of those like Mio squirt things, those zero sugar things, and just like into your beer?
Yeah.
I'm gonna try that.
Yeah, I could maybe do that.
I'm gonna try that because that's 0 sugar, and then in a low carb, then you got like a low carb rattler.
Yeah, kind of.
Boom.
Maybe.
Let's patent it.
You've come up with a life hack right there.
I guess you can't patent a life hack, yeah, because I don't own the beer or the Mio.
Yeah. So. Maybe we'll have to next time we record, we'll have to try to mix up one of those live on the recording, and we'll see how it pans out, and we can review the experience.
Deal.
Okay. So, as I said at the beginning, we are not talking about the autobiography of Malcolm X this time, because we've been bad and we are behind on our reading yet again. I ask you to not try to calculate how many pages we needed to read in 2 weeks, because by all accounts, you really should have been able to get through it, and we have no excuse. However, I wanted to get a podcast out. I'm really not a fan of missing episodes. And so what we've decided to do is look at something that is at least tangentially connected to the Autobiography of Malcolm X, and that is the film Gone with the Wind. It is connected because it is mentioned early on in the book. When Malcolm is young, he goes to the movie theater and he watches it, and he is the only black person in the theater, and experiences some amount of shame at the portrayal of blacks on the screen, particularly one character, the character of Prissy, who we'll get to when we get talking about the movie. But Gone with the Wind is also kind of connected to censorship in 2020 because there was a lot of cries that it was being censored earlier this year when it was temporarily taken down from the new HBO Plus streaming service. They didn't take it down to remove it. They did take it down because they wanted to have some context around the depiction of race in the film. Specifically, they added about a 5-minute video in front of the film talking about how the film handles race, and there's also a feature. There's a 1-hour discussion sort of about the Gone with the Wind in history and how it holds up, and whether it's problematic, and sort of there's a longer discussion around that subject available on HBO Plus. All of which I think is irrelevant to us in Canada because we don't have HBO Plus. But we did. It is available on Netflix if you want to check it out. If you haven't, though, I will state off the bat, I probably would only give it about 2.5 stars.
Really, eh?
Yeah. What was your thought? If you had to give it a review, a rating?
I didn't really think about it, but I think 3.5.
3.5?
The cinematography was beautiful. Like, there were some shots where you just, like, you're watching it, you sit back, you're like, man, that is, I don't know if that is a painted background or if that is an actual sunset, but some shots were just gorgeous.
Quite often in that era, there would be painted backgrounds, obviously. But yeah, I agree. A lot of the cinematography was gorgeous. I think, technically speaking, it's a spectacular film. All of it looks really good. And
what year? What I should know this. What year did it come out?
1939.
No.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, the book came out in 1936. The rights to the film were bought almost immediately afterwards. In fact, there were people, I think, trying to get the rights to the film even before it was published. And then there was apparently some delay in getting the film started, partly because I think the director wanted, I can't think of the actor's name, but the guy who plays Rhett Butler in the film wanted that actor particularly, and it took some time to convince him to come aboard and everything else. But I believe it came out in 1939, and it is, if adjusted for inflation, still the highest grossing film of all time. Although obviously, you look at it, it didn't make that much for what dollars were worth at the time.
Right.
But it was the highest grossing film of all time, not adjusted for inflation, for a very long time. It was nominated for a buttload of Academy Awards, won a buttload of Academy Awards. The actress who played Mammy, whose name I can't remember right now, but she was the first Black actress to be nominated for an Academy Award and to win an Academy Award.
I actually watched a documentary, a series, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about like African Americans and Black people in, like, British Black people as well in the movie scene and the TV scene, and like the hurdles that they had to go over. And they actually, I can't remember if they had her talking on it, but she was definitely mentioned, because that's a big thing, right? To win an Academy Award, to be the first Black woman to win an Academy Award. But there was everyone that talked about it. There was kind of like this, this tone, like that was the only kind of character that they could portray at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
I read a quote from her recently somewhere from that time because she was criticized for taking the role. And she said something along the lines of, I'd rather make $700 for playing a house servant in a film than $7 for being one.
That's a depressing quote.
Mm-hmm. But at the premiere,
mm-hmm.
she was not invited to the premiere.
Really?
And so Clark Gable, who played Rhett Butler, was initially going to boycott the premiere over that. Although they did eventually convince him to come. And then again, during the Academy Awards, she was, of course, segregated at a separate table. So for, all of the supposed progress that's associated with the notion of her getting that Academy Award nomination and her receiving the Academy Award, it was surrounded by, some continued examples of ongoing racism, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're speaking of the technical aspects of the film, there are two elements of it that really struck me kind of as my favorites. The first is there's a recurring shot that occurs 3 times in the movie where it's sort of a character silhouetted as a camera pulls back, and we see the whole of their plantation, Tara, as the camera pulls back. The first is at the very beginning when Scarlett is with her father, and the father's talking about the importance of property. Mm-hmm. And it pulls back, and there's their 2 silhouettes and the silhouette of a tree, and Tara the plantation is in the background. It happens again at the end of the second act, after Scarlett has made it back to the plantation, sort of following the huge casualties in the Civil War. The plantation is still there, but it's been picked over by the Yankees. The family is still there, but they're basically penniless, foodless, and sort of at rock bottom. And it's that same shot again, the silhouette of her, the silhouette of the tree, pulling back, and again, now you've got Tara a bit more destitute in the background. And then the shot is repeated one more time at the very end of the movie after she's kind of got her life again, like she's been successful, she's rich, but now she's kind of lost everything again. But she's still hopeful for the future. She's going to go back to Tara and sort of try to continue on with her life, and it pulls back again, and this time it's beautiful again. It's rebuilt. It's just her standing there by herself. And so those 3 shots are very unique. I think they're very distinct to this film. And they did strike me as kind of visually impressive.
Okay. Yeah.
Did those strike you that way? Did they?
I'm struggling to remember exactly. Like, is it with the silhouette with the tree and kind of the sunset? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was gorgeous.
I particularly like the first 2 uses because there was such a dramatic change in her status from the beginning of the film to the end of, the first act, essentially, before the intermission. And those pictures showed that change where the first one is clearly that she's rich, the family is rich, mm-hmm. everybody's rich, and now at the
not
end,
everybody.
Well, the people that are important are rich. We'll get to that. The other shot that I really liked, and it's now probably in my list of sort of favorite film shots of all time, is the scene where Scarlett, her best friend Melanie, is about to have a baby, And so Scarlett is off to find the doctor. Now, meanwhile, they're in a city that's being assaulted by the Northerners during the Civil War. And as she goes to get the doctor, she starts walking through all of the wounded and the dead that are lying on the ground outside of, I'm not sure where the doctor is, some kind of a temporary hospital. But as she walks,
it was a church. It was a church.
It was a church.
Yeah.
And so as she starts walking, she passes by 2, 3, 5, 10 of these people. But as she continues to walk and as the camera continues to pull back, now we see it's 20, it's 50, it's 100. And in the end, what I read is they actually had 800 extras on the ground there, and then another 800 dummies. So there were essentially 1,600 characters, wounded and dead, on the screen there. And of course, it pans back again further until you see there was, I think, the Confederate flag that was all tattered. And
right.
I think what was really interesting about that scene is, one, it shows, how big an impact the war has had on the South at this point, especially when you compare to how excited all of the Southerners were at the beginning of the film about the idea of war. Like, everyone was super excited about going off to war. They're going to win. They're going to get to keep their slaves, which is the most important thing. And now clearly they're losing quite badly, and many of them are wounded and many of them are dead. And then the other thing I think it really drives home is the futility of Scarlett's mission in that moment. Like, in her head, the doctor is going to ignore
yeah.
these 1,600 plus people and come take care of the one woman who's pregnant. Like,
but that just speaks to her character.
The level of entitlement in her character is
from start to finish. Like, even when she was destitute, it was like she still felt like she deserved everything.
Yeah.
But then, okay, you want to talk about great cinematography,
sure,
and all of that, all those extras, all those dummies, and everything being big and grand at that moment. I don't think it was much long after that where one of the most corny shots in the film happened, when she was riding in the buggy with Rhett, and they did the old having like a something
rear projection,
rear projection. They were just like standing still and moving, and there was a rear projection of things moving behind them, and it was so obvious. And that stood out to me as like probably the worst cinematography.
But again, that's where you have to stop and remember that was 1939, and that was what they could do. Like,
right, but compared to the rest of it, like, it didn't feel like it was coming from 1939. Like, there was a lot of shots. The majority of the movie just seemed like beautiful. I'm amazed to know how old it is, actually.
Well, some of the shots around, like the burning of the city when they lit up the ammunition, some of those shots were a little bit iffy. I thought, as far as like comparing them to modern shots. But again, it's a question of what is available. And I mean, the shot of her walking through the bodies, that's a crane shot. And as long as cranes exist, like, you can get that shot. But, following along with somebody on a horse and carriage, I don't think they were able to like strap a camera into another horse and carriage to ride along beside it at the time. So you just sort of did the best you could. Because there were scenes of them actually riding.
There was, and that was
you saw them sort of leave, and then it would, like, in the carriage as they were riding with the rear projection.
It almost seemed to like switch in between them actually riding in the street and then them riding in front of a.
Yeah.
It was kind of jarring a little bit.
Yeah, there's moments like that, but speaking of sort of the technical proficiency in the film, did you have any favorite scenes or any moments that stood out to you?
I think we kind of both gravitated to the same. I don't really remember the pan out, but I do remember the silhouette of the tree against the the sunset.
Yeah.
I thought that was really gorgeous. Favorite shots. I'm just trying. It was a long movie. I'm trying to run it through quickly in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Practically 4 hours. It's a long one.
I was just pretty impressed with the whole thing, especially now to realize like how old it was. Like,
yeah,
it really does hold up. I would say the photography holds up quite well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not what you expect when you think of a movie of that age.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of action. I felt like the action, whatever action scenes there were a little off.
Mm-hmm.
I did like how rough Tara looked when she came back to it. Like when they were actually in the house, everything was stripped apart. It was basically just a shell of its former self.
Yeah.
To have that kind of what would you call it? Stark contrast.
Mm-hmm.
In something that, the first half of the movie happened at a lot of those same places. And then to see, that took a lot of work to build those places up and then destroy them. Like it was actually really impressive.
Well, and it was like that when she went back to, I think it's called 12 Oaks too,
Mm-hmm.
the other plantation.
Yep. And that was such a
destroyed.
short little, like the amount of work that went into that short little shot. Because she wasn't there for very long, and then the rest of the time that is in Tara, right?
Yeah.
So,
but with 12 Oaks, I mean, that one was completely destroyed, and it I think gives a sense that an extra level of concern about what she might find when she gets to Tara. Like,
right?
Will Tara be in the same state? Will there be anything left? I'll say that I think I liked the first half of the film better than the second half of the film.
Yeah,
maybe that's
I think
because there was more going on and there was more dramatic tension because of the war. And there was also the elements of Scarlett trying to get back to Tara and what was going to happen there. And sort of the second half of the film, which is more about reconstruction, and sort of Scarlett getting her fortune back in some nefarious ways, didn't hold my interest as much. Also, I guess potentially because I didn't care a whole lot about... Well, I didn't care a lot about any of Scarlett's marriages. The first one ends so quickly. She marries a guy, he goes off to war, and then he promptly dies.
And that marriage was ridiculous. She was into his brother, and she's all like, well, I'm going to make him jealous. I'm going to marry his brother before they go off to war.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that was a petty decision.
Well, I mean, every decision that she made.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's not true. That's actually not true. The second marriage to Kennedy was more about money, right? He had opened his store. He was kind of in the lumber business, and she realized that the lumber business could be huge. And so she knew Kennedy was going to marry another woman.
Her friend.
So she
lied. Or was
lied.
it her sister? Was it her friend or her sister?
I don't remember. It may have been her sister.
Okay.
But she lied to him that her sister or the other woman had married somebody else so that he would marry her so she could basically get a lumber business. Which is nefarious, but which also she did to protect her family and keep her family alive.
Yeah.
It also makes her rich.
But then it also leads to his death.
Does it lead to his death?
Yeah, it does. Well, because she's married to him, right? Or she convinces him to marry her. And then she just kind of runs the business how she wants. She's her own independent woman. She fights with him.
Right, but that's not what leads to his death.
Yeah, well, it does, because she decides to ride alone through a dangerous part of town, right? And she gets attacked. And
You're right. Women should not ride alone.
That's not what I'm saying.
You heard it here first. Oren does not think women should be left unattended.
No, that's not what I'm. That's not what I mean.
I know.
It's not what I mean at all. But the way he feels like he has to defend her honor because she was attacked, and he goes out to kill these people and ends up getting shot, getting killed, defending her honor, a woman who never loved him, who only used him to, like you say, get a lumber business. So in a way, it does lead to his death.
Yeah.
Not in a misogynistic way, though.
And then, of course, she eventually marries Rhett Butler, who's been pursuing her through the whole film. Who he drifts in for a while to like hit on her, and then he drifts out of the movie for a while, and then he drifts back in again for a while. He hits on her, and I guess eventually she just kind of says, "Fuck it." They get married.
Well, basically, she's like, he's got money, so.
But so does she by that point.
Yeah, but not like him. Like, he was like, filthy
No, he
rich.
was very rich, but like, I don't think she cared about the money, really. Maybe she did, but I mean, she also quite enjoyed being self-made, because when they get married, she says, like, can I keep the mill? Like, that's important to her, that she still has it, and that she's still able to, generate money for herself.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was literally he kissed her into marrying him, right? He's like, marry me. And she's like, no. And he's like, I'll kiss you. Nom, nom, nom. And she's like, oh, okay. And that was it.
Like, and that must speak to the way that, like, the dynamic back then. I guess, I mean, even now, there's, like, that whole, like, the guy's got to take charge, and, but it seemed a bit more extreme in the movie. It was a little uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, he was very much
when he was, like,
kind of
grabbing and holding, and she was, like, struggling, and it's like,
Oh, yeah. And that
I don't know how I feel about this, right?
That romantic scene near the end where he basically, carries her upstairs to the bedroom against her will.
Yeah, and then she wakes up feeling the happiest she's ever been.
Right.
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
No, please don't have sex with me. Oh, wait, that was actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
Marital rape is great.
Oh, my God. This is how they thought back then.
Yeah, he was very much the stereotype, of that kind of very forceful, I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to like it because I'm a man and you're a woman. Mm-hmm. But there was also a lot of talk about, like, marriage not entirely being about love. Like, nobody really dated. It was just like, hey, marry me. Yes or no. And then they got married, and that was it. That was their life together, with or without sex. Because there was this kind of implication, again, towards the end, after Rhett and Scarlett got married, when she says that, she says she didn't want to have children anymore. And, sort of hints, what that means. Which is to imply, I think, that, she's saying, I don't want to have sex with you anymore.
Right.
And he says, I could divorce you for that. Which, again, at the time is probably true. But then she talks about, like, her friend Melanie, who can't, and she's married to Ashley, who is the man that Scarlett is actually in love with. And Melanie can't have kids anymore. And she basically says, Ashley doesn't do anything. Again, the implication being that because Melanie would die if she had children. And I guess there's not much in the way of birth control in 1939 or earlier, because this was during the Civil War, so it's actually in the 1800s. If your wife would die if she got pregnant, you just have to kind of stop having sex with her. I don't remember what my point was here.
I don't.
I will say maybe my favorite part of the movie, and this is a little bad, but so Rhett and Scarlett have a daughter that they named, what is it, Bonnie Blue, right?
Yeah.
And so Bonnie Blue ends up loving horses. She gets... Do you know where I'm going with this?
I know where you're going with this, yeah.
See, and so, Rhett is teaching her to ride horses as she grows up, and there's this moment where Scarlett is sitting out in the back, and Bonnie is riding her horse, and Rhett comes out to sort of apologize and say maybe we can work things out because they've had some ups and downs, they've had some struggles, and Bonnie is like, I'm gonna jump over the horse jump thing, and I even raised the bar. Watch me, I can do this. And Scarlett is all scared. Oh my God, don't let her do it, Rhett. And Rhett is like, Bonnie, don't do it. And she's like, I'm going to do it. And I don't know about you, but I immediately knew what was going to happen there. And I immediately knew.
Yeah, because that's how her dad died.
Exactly. It was going to connect to her dad, who earlier in the film died riding his horse and jumping his horse over a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like,
sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that, but yeah.
This kid is going to die as soon as she jumps over this thing. And it's probably the least believable death I've ever seen in a film. Like, the horse jumps over this thing. The girl falls off the horse into the grass. She fell maybe 2.5 feet
at a speed of 5 or 6 kilometers an hour.
But she's dead. Which, I mean, tragic. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Losing a kid.
But also, one time I told my sister to run me over with a bike, and she wasn't going to do it. And I said, just do it. Trust me. And I just thought she wouldn't do it because she was my sister and she loved me, and I was young and I was stupid. And she comes barreling at me full speed. She must have been doing like 20, 30 kilometers an hour, flat into me. Down I go. Bike runs right over top of me. I get up. I got a few scratches. I'm crying, but I'm fine. That crash would not have. I'm sorry. Yeah, like, you're right. It was like absolutely. I don't know why I said that story. It was a funny story, but don't tell people to run. Don't tell people to run you over because they might do it.
I thought that you were going to say it at the end of the story, and I died. So never know. You never know what's going to happen.
No, I just mean like the collision with that bike was so much worse than that jump with that. It was like only a half-size pony. Like, it was a tiny little horse.
Yeah, it was tiny. But
and then I love that they didn't think, or like the writers must have thought, people aren't going to get this connection. They're not going to get the foreshadowing here. So she actually, like,
right, yeah,
when she drove off, she had to go like, Pa.
There were there's actually a couple of points towards the end that I found a little bit funny, and just how dark it gets. But before this scene, and this is actually kind of the moment that kind of starts some of the tension. Well, maybe not starts some of the tension, but it's sort of what eventually leads to Rhett to apologize in that moment when the daughter dies. But as a scene earlier, Rhett and Bonnie Blue had been to England because Rhett thought they needed some time apart. And Bonnie had started missing her mom, so they come back. Bonnie goes to go check out her horse. Meanwhile, Rhett and Scarlett are chatting at the top of their grand staircase, and Scarlett reveals that she's pregnant again. And,
right.
And they have some back and forth about who the father is. She says it's Rhett. I think the implication that I got, because of the timing, is that this would have been a baby conceived during that moment of marital rape earlier in the film. And, she says something like, I didn't want this baby, Rhett. And he says, well, maybe you'll get lucky and take a fall.
Or have an accident, I think he said.
Or have an accident, yeah. Something like that. And she's like, oh, and lunges at him to push him, and then promptly falls down the stairs. And it was just like, oh my God. Like it was simultaneously shocking, but also like it just felt so on the nose. That
yeah,
was like, really,
a lot
movie?
Of things felt like really on the nose in this movie, for sure.
And it's maybe one of those things that, like, they're cliche or on the nose now because of moments like that, but at the time, viewers would have looked at that and been shocked by it. But
yeah, I mean, like, nowadays somebody might write that same situation, but they might say, well, maybe you'll be lucky and have an accident, and then a couple of scenes will pass, and then in the next scene something will happen, and then they'll call back to that conversation.
Yeah. The thing,
rather than everything happening like immediately, right?
Maybe Maybe they couldn't have done that in Gone with the Wind, though, because it was already 4 hours long, and they needed to...
They needed to cut it short.
How can we keep this from getting any longer? Let's just have her fall right after that gets mentioned. That'll speed things up.
Man, this is just something I want to talk about. I don't know if it's relevant or whatever, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the acting in the second half, I mean, I know you don't like the second half as much, but the acting in the second half was so much better than the acting in the first half. Especially at the very beginning of the film, like everything was so exaggerated. Every sigh,
the opening seemed like it almost seemed like it was a musical.
Yeah,
it almost seemed like people were going to start like breaking out into song and dance. It had that kind of.
It was like so choreographed. It's like, oh, you really go to the barbecue with me? Like whatever. Yeah.
And also the way that like everyone was so, and for me that's not so much the performance, but I was just entertained and curious whether or not that was the reaction at the time, like that everyone was so super excited about the prospect of going to war. It's like, yeah, we finally get to take on the North. And I mean, it might be because, so I guess the biggest thing that bugged me about this film is the way that it is very much intended as a love letter to the bygone era where the Southern gentleman was filthy rich, a man of leisure, all on the back of the slave.
Yeah.
And like even from and I was meant to write down exactly what it was, but like the opening text of the film that basically says, this is a movie about a beautiful time long past that blah, blah, blah. And it literally says that like, we wish this was still the case.
Does it actually say that?
Not those words,
right.
But that sentiment is very much there. And I guess with that sentiment, at least in the way it's being depicted in the film, comes this attitude that everyone is super eager to defend their way of life, specifically owning people and making them do their work for them.
Yeah.
That, of course, they're super happy about going off to take on the villainous North that wants to take all that away.
And another thing that bugged me with this movie, it seemed like all the slaves were happy to be slaves, and the ones that didn't go off to fight for their slave masters remained as servants. Really, there was no discussion on whether they were being paid at this point or not. They just kind of stuck around.
Yeah.
And that was kind of odd, to say the least.
I think that's an important part of a lot of sort of stories around the South is these ideas that slaves were happy to be slaves.
Bullshit.
Yeah. But that was very much the message in, another early 1900s film, The Birth of a Nation. There were scenes in that one where, slaves were going to their masters and begging them not to be released, begging, not to let the North abolish slavery because that's where they wanted to be. And it's that kind of... it's not even a case of the victor, the winner writing history because the South lost.
Yeah.
But I guess even then, it's such a black mark on the history of America that even the winners who are opposed to slavery don't really want to talk about slavery. And they're like, we totally freed the slaves, but also when we didn't do that, they were okay with being slaves.
Right.
So all those years where it happened, it wasn't such a big deal.
Right.
But
yeah. They were fine with everything that's happened. We just came in and made life better for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
And yeah, the portrayal of the slaves was not great. Like, not. Do you
want to get into Prissy?
Bright Prissy. Yeah.
Prissy.
Who I think Rhett referred to as a, forgive my language, a simple-minded darky. she's basically portrayed as being mentally incompetent, mentally ill, mentally, what would you say?
I would say childlike.
Yeah.
You know, little white lies. Oh, I know how to do that. I've done plenty of babies. And then when it got time to do the baby, she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just said that so I can see. They never let me see.
I don't know nothing about birth and no babies.
Yeah, like, and just everything that she did was either a lie or it was just like she was so far below
cows.
them. Yeah, exactly. Like just like a kid, like a very young child. That's how they portrayed her, right?
Yeah. And then there were when, all of the slaves are speaking that kind of very broken English that is stereotypical of those sorts of characters, I guess. The slave Pork, I believe was his name. There was a great line, I thought, right after Scarlett made it back to Tara at the end of the first half of the movie, and she's arrived with a cow, and Pork says something like, "Who's gonna milk the cow, ma'am? I'm just a house servant." And it sort of has this implication that like he couldn't learn, right? Because he's a slave, he's a black person. Of course, he can't learn something new. This is what he does. He's a house slave. He can't learn how to do something outside. And again, that line just sort of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Do you have any parts of the film that struck you as particularly problematic beyond the ones that I've mentioned, or
in terms of the racial divide?
Particularly, but I mean, if there's other things too, we could talk about that.
I would say for me, it was just the eagerness and the willingness of every black character to help or assist their white quote unquote masters.
Yeah.
During the war, going to war, it just didn't seem, all the relationships seemed so false. They seemed fake. They seemed unrealistic,
Yeah, totally.
Like slaves are going to go willingly. I mean, maybe they went, but I doubt they went willingly if they really understood the situation as it was.
They sure, yeah, what was it? Big Al?
Big Sam. Big Sam.
Big Sam.
Yeah.
Big Sam and the rest of the field slaves from the plantation. There's a scene where they're sort of marching off to dig trenches on the front lines. They're happy as can be. They're like singing songs.
And this is
going off to.
Yeah. Well, and this is during that scene you're talking about where there's so many dead or dying people laying around too.
I think it's earlier than that, but.
Oh, is it? I thought it was.
Yeah, because they haven't, at that point, the fighting hasn't quite gotten to the city yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I mean, they're marching off to, maybe get blown up while they're digging trenches, and perfectly content to do that. And around that same time too, there's a scene where, speaking of the happiness in slaves, Scarlett and one of the other sort of, I think, older women that she had hung out with were walking away from one place, and there's this group of black people on the street that are like singing and dancing, and I suspect that they must all be, I guess at that point, no, it is during Reconstruction, so they would be freed slaves at that point, I think. And the basically Scarlett and the other woman, they plow right through the middle of them unnecessarily, I think. And the other woman is like waving her hat to like get them out of the way, and that kind of disrespectful treatment just felt very much like, how dare you exist freely like this, enjoying yourself on our streets Oh my God.
Yeah, because what's her name? Scarlett?
Mhm.
Because Scarlett's going through something.
Right, yeah. He's having a hard time here.
God.
That was probably
Fucking
after,
Scarlett.
I think that was just before she discovered that Kennedy had the store. And I think it was after she tried getting money from Rhett while he was in prison. And she was pissed off because she couldn't convince Rhett to give her any money.
Boo-hoo. No, sorry. I have like little to no sympathy for that woman.
No, I have little to no sympathy for most of the characters in the film. Although, I think we talked about this earlier, and you suggested that Melanie might be somewhat sympathetic, and I agree with that.
Melanie seemed like she generally gave a shit about the people around her.
Yeah.
And, I mean, at least that's how she was written, right?
Yeah.
And it almost seemed like Melanie and Ashley, who, if you haven't watched the movie, spoiler alert, they're cousins and they're married. So,
Yeah.
that was a thing, apparently. But they were all proud of it back then. It wasn't like
because I think
it wasn't a dig like it is now.
It's mentioned in the movie too that some other people had married their cousins or this second cousin, and it's talked about as if it was the norm, and maybe not the norm, but it's acceptable.
It's funny. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it goes along the line too of like the cliche notion that Southerners marry their cousins.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like,
right, that's the whole cliche, and
like back then it was like something to be proud of. It was like, oh, they keep it in the family, and now it's like, oh yeah, Southerners, they're inbred, right?
Yeah,
and it's like all these actors that played like all the Southerners, all the slave owners were maybe not all of them, but the majority of them were physically fit, attractive, suave. Do you think that really was the case back then? Or, I imagine in reality, some of these people were just buck teeth, snot nose, boily.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe not necessarily fit because, they wouldn't necessarily have done a lot of work. But I mean, they were socialites, right? It was all about the parties and the dancing and the mint juleps, and because they didn't have to work, they had the slaves do the work for them. They had all the financial benefits, and so it was very much like sort of that stuff from the very beginning of the movie where they're at the big barbecue and everyone's just gossiping about who's going to marry who and who's falling in love with who. And it's just, I mean, I don't know very much about the South of that era, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was at least close to that.
Okay.
But who knows?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
No.
I don't know. Shit, I had a point. What were we talking about before this?
Marrying cousins?
Marrying cousins. No, I was talking about, okay. So Melanie and Ashley were, I think, and this is just my opinion, kind of written to encapsulate the perfect Southern couple.
Okay.
Like Ashley held honor, even in the face of temptation. He went off to war. He was valiant. He was, dignified. He, thought for the future. He had all these things, all these characteristics that I think the Southerners at least felt like they had, maybe.
Yeah.
And Melanie was just the purest of wives, pure to her husband, pure to her friends, even in the face of Ashley, and because I don't think anything happened between Ashley and Scarlett, but
no, beyond
it
I don't
definitely
think
could have been
the,
taken that way from the context.
They kissed each other once, and then he held her in the lumber factory once, which was
right.
So scandalous.
Well, I mean, if you walked in on that, you'd think, yeah. I mean, I can see that. But and I love how they gave this one line in the film. They gave that to the person that they had written to be the ideal Southerner. And he said, I would have freed them all once my father passed and I had control of the plantation. Like, bullshit, you would have.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they were trying to say that the Southerners, or, you know, by placing him as the ultimate or the ideal Southerner.
Yeah.
And he had that, you know, empathy for the slaves. Seemed like just a roundabout way to alleviate that. What's the word I'm looking for? You know, you got cause and effect. You got what's the word? You know what I mean?
I don't know the word, but I think I get what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. That was a long ways to get to a really simple point.
There was, though, speaking of that sort of thing, I'm reminded of another scene that I thought was quite funny. And it was when Scarlett is first starting the lumber mill, and she gets convicts working for her.
Yep.
And Ashley is like, you know, we really shouldn't be doing this. Like the foreman is gonna like beat these guys and not treat them very well. Whereas if we hired some Negroes, they would do a much better job. And Scarlett's like, well, we can't afford to pay the Negroes. And so it seemed like these convicts ultimately were going to be put in pretty much the same kind of working condition as
the new slaves
were.
Yeah.
But because these are now white people, Ashley's like, ooh, I don't know if we should do this. And it's like, now that we have to like pay the black people to come in here and do the work, I don't know if that's really worth it. It was, I don't know if the film intended that scene at the time to be as telling kind of as it is looking at it now.
No, I don't think. I think that they intended to romanticize. Like it really feels like you said, a love letter to the racist slave owning South.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't talked about yet?
I don't know. Her like 5 minutes of hardship. Speaking
before she marries Kennedy.
Yeah. Yeah. And how
she tried eating a turnip.
Yeah,
apparently they had to get a different actress to actually record the sound of retching there. And from what I read, there's two stories for why. One, either Vivian Lee's performance wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is that Vivian Lee refused to do fake barfing there because it wasn't ladylike.
Oh, okay. So. Well, you know what I say to that?
Yeah.
But you know what's really funny is through this whole movie, through all the characters that are around her, Melanie and the friends, and even Ashley, after he's kind of like told her, like, you know what, you got to leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
The only redeeming thing that she had done that let these people convince themselves that they needed to stick by her was, you know, that short amount of like effort that she put in.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I don't know if that was what was intended, but it was like, that meant so much more than everything else that she had done in her life. All the boys that she had chasing her, all the fake marriages and wealth that she had afterwards. It all came back to, well, you know, she kept us together in Tara when everything was falling apart. And we can't abandon her because she kept us together and she kept us fed. And, you know, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if that was the intention, but that was an interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
That I kind of took away from it.
Yeah, I'm thinking now that the movie this reminds me the most of is like Boogie Nights, except I guess with a lot less pornography.
Wait. I've never seen Boogie Nights.
Oh, really?
Speak about the pornography.
It's a really good movie, but it's set in the world of porn in the 1970s and 1980s. But it's a story that, everyone is kind of, they've got everything at the beginning. There's a little bit of a rise for the main character played by Mark Wahlberg, but basically early on, everybody's rich, everybody's having a good time, everything's great. And then towards the middle of the film, everything falls apart for everybody. And then by the end of the film, everybody's got everything back again. Everybody's happy. And most importantly, nobody's really learned anything. And I kind of feel like that's the case here, right? Like at the end of the movie, so after going for practically 4 hours of Scarlett convinced that she's in love with Ashley and Ashley is the only one for her, we get to the end of the film where Melanie is on her deathbed. And Ashley's like, I will never love another woman as much as her. And finally, after all this, and 4 hours real time and like something like 12 years of in movie time, Scarlett's finally like, oh, I guess he won't love me.
Oh yeah.
Wait, maybe I love Rhett.
But I also
runs off to Rhett as he's packing to leave.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, Rhett, though, I do really love you. And, well, as film history knows, he doesn't much give a damn.
Frankly, my dear, I don't. Yeah, okay. But
even then, after he's gone,
yeah,
she's talking to herself and thinking to herself that she'll hunt him down. She'll find him.
Yeah.
Things will be better tomorrow. Tomorrow is another day for me to spend 12 years pining over somebody different.
Yeah. But can I circle back just a little bit, because there was another point to that whole situation that really stuck out to me. How she ended up making Melanie's death all about her. Like it was sad. She went in and talked to Melanie. She had that heart to heart with Melanie, and Melanie basically told her everything that she wanted to hear. And then she went out and in front of her husband, basically mauled the soon to be widower. Is that what it is for a man? A widower?
Yeah.
And then when he doesn't reciprocate, she's like, oh my God, he doesn't love me. There's a woman dying in the next room, but she's got to have this whole fucking monologue about her fucking love life. That bothered me.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that needed to happen like in the fucking hospital. That could have happened.
But again, no, the movie's already 4 hours long. We got to keep it snappy, right?
Yeah, she's got to have this revelation as soon as she's on her deathbed.
What a movie. And I will say too, this is the first time that I've seen this movie. I don't know if I lose film nerd cred for that, but I will also admit that I was not a super big fan. I will rave about its technical achievements. It's a very good looking film. There's some pretty great shots in it. It might have, obviously I think films that have characters that never learn anything can be entertaining. I mentioned Boogie Nights.
Yeah, so
I'm a big fan of that film.
Okay.
Maybe this would have been easier to take if it wasn't 4 hours long. I don't know.
Okay, what was the point of this movie? Everybody's got a point when they write something. There's a reason for it. What was the reason behind this book? What was the reason behind this movie, other than just romanticizing a bullshit system? Or do you think that was the only purpose behind it?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of that. I think it was a bit about writing about the Civil War. I think
completely one-sided.
Yeah, but I mean,
I never talked about how every time a Yankee or a Northerner, right, which is what they call the Northerners, Yankees. Every time a Yankee was around, he was dirty, vile, about to rob or rape. Yeah, exactly. Like, very, very one-sided film, for sure.
Yeah, but I think too, like, it was written by a woman who grew up kind of in the wake of the Civil War in the South. And so that's the perspective that she's speaking from. And I think I've read that, some people have argued that her depiction of slaves in the book, which is also very similar to the depiction of slaves in the film, came from the fact that, like, these are maybe the stories that she was told growing up, that's how it was. The slaves were happy to be there, and
right,
and blah 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 blah. And
yeah, because like kid asks, like, "Mommy, Daddy, I know you had slaves. Why?" And they're like, "Oh, honey, they were happy to be here."
Yeah,
yeah.
You know what? I do have a theory about what the point of this movie was.
Okay.
The point of this movie was so that we would have something to talk about on this episode, because we're so far behind on reading the book that we're supposed to read.
Oh my God.
They didn't know it at the time.
They didn't. No.
But that was the real point behind making Gone with the Wind. And I am super grateful for them for doing that.
Okay, can I tell a story that reminds me of? Just a short one. So I'll circle back to why what you said reminded me if it's not clear. But
okay.
I'm driving home from work one day, and I pull off the highway onto our road, and somebody has got themselves stuck in the ditch. I'm not really sure how. It didn't seem like an obvious place to be stuck in the ditch, but they were stuck. So I pulled over and I was like, "Hey, what's going on? Are you stuck?" And they're like, "Yeah, we are. We don't know if we should call a tow truck or what." I said, "You know what? I'll go home. I'll grab my 4x4 truck. I'll come and I'll pull you out." And I come back with the truck and a sling and all that. I tie them off and I'm looking at where they are. I'm like, "Look, I can pull you out. I can't promise there's not going to be any damage. It's up to you if you want to wait for the tow truck." And they're like, "No, we trust you. If you think we can get us out." It was in the wintertime, so it was all like ice and snow. It's pretty smooth sailing to pull somebody out of the ditch, right? So I pulled them out. Nothing was damaged. Everything was good. And, I felt good for doing something good. I was like, yeah, these guys are having a rough time. It's cold out here. They're just sitting out here. I got them out of the ditch. They're back on their way. Right on. And they're like, first they said thank you, which was nice. But then they decided to thank God in front of me. They're like, "Thank you, God, for bringing him to us in our time of need." And I was like, because they were missionaries, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, cool. See you later. And I left, and I got thinking about it later. And I was like, that was a really arrogant fucking thing to say. It's like, I grew up in Williams Lake. I'd lived up that road since I was 4 years old. I must have been like 27 at the time. So that's like 23 years kind of spent in the same general area. And all of that time, the whole part of my life was just so that I could be there at that one moment when these two idiots decided to get their car stuck on a perfectly straight fucking stretch of road.
Hey man, God works in mysterious ways.
Right? It's like exactly like you're saying, like, "Oh, well, I can't thankfully they made this movie so we could do this." It's like the same arrogant fucking bullshit, right?
Hey, you called me. I don't know about you. I'm about done with, I think, what I can talk about with this movie. Have you got any further thoughts?
Yeah, you know what? Other than maybe if we wanted to rate it, give it a few different ratings. I'd say cinematography 4 out of 5. I'd say story 2 out of 5. I'd say acting 1.5 out of 5. But yeah,
I give 5 out of 5 to Rhett Butler's fake teeth.
Those are fake?
I think they were fake.
Oh, okay. It's the mustache drew me away from the obvious fakeness of the teeth.
That mustache was so.
You reminded me of the Addams Family. What's the dad's name of the Addams
Gomez
Family?
Adams.
Gomez Adams. Did that character ever play Gomez Adams? Because it would have been perfect.
Did Clark Gable ever play Gomez Adams? Is that what you're asking?
I am asking that, but by your tone, I'm feeling like that was a stupid question.
No, I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Probably not. And it probably is a stupid question, especially, if the answer is no. But, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he didn't, but.
That's a perfect Gomez fucking stash, though. Perfect.
Yeah, so that was Gone with the Wind. If you haven't seen Gone with the Wind, this conversation probably didn't make much sense because we didn't spend much time talking about the details of the film, but it's 1939 it was made, so if you haven't seen it by now, that's more than ours. Also, we neglected to mention at the beginning that there are spoilers in this film or in this review or in this discussion. But again, the movie came out in 1939, so it's to be expected at this point, I think. Next episode, barring an apocalyptic event, I think we will be back to discussing the Autobiography of Malcolm X. I only have 2 chapters left to read, so I got like almost 2 weeks to get that done, so I shouldn't have any excuses. I'm out of the kindness of my heart, I'm not going to ask Oren how much he has or hasn't read. We'll find out next time.
I don't know if it's the kindness of your heart or if you just don't want to have a heart attack.
I just probably don't want to know.
Safety of your heart.
I am saving my own sanity here as exactly what's going on.
Oh, hey.
Ignorance. I've often heard ignorance is bliss, so.
Is that why we're so depressed all the time, Todd?
Maybe. Okay. It might very well be.
Can we throw something at the listeners real quick?
Yeah.
You talked about doing a possible live episode after the last episode talking about the autobiography. So do you want to?
Yeah. So one of the things I thought about as we were approaching the end of our look at the autobiography of Malcolm X, next episode we'll be talking about sort of the last chapters of the book. And then the episode after that, we'll be looking at the sort of 100 or so page epilogue. And also along with that, hopefully, if you're able to track it down, I'd like to be able to have watched and talk about the film Malcolm X by Spike Lee. But I realized that at no point along this journey, because we're only talking about specific sections of the book, we haven't had an opportunity to sort of talk about our take on the book as a whole, and specifically engage in a conversation about how we feel about the fact that the book was challenged or banned. Do we think that its banning was justified? Things like that. And so I thought it would be interesting to do sort of a final wrap-up episode where we talk about those things. But on top of that, I've discovered that one of the things that we can do through Podbean, which is our host for this podcast, we can run a live podcast. And it struck me that would be a really, I think, interesting way to have that final wrap-up episode. We do a live version on the Sunday when an episode would normally drop, so Sunday afternoon. And we'd promote it in advance so people knew what time it was going on. And then as we're recording live and broadcasting live, listeners could come and engage with us. And I'm not sure right now, I haven't done any tests on what the live broadcast is like, but presumably there are some ways of engaging with the audience, either through a chat board maybe, or even better, if listeners could call in and talk to us and be part of the process of discussing sort of our overall reaction to the book. Yeah, and that's my hope, is that we can make that happen, because I think that'll be a really, really fun way to have like I said, a final look at the book that we're reading for this part of the show. If nobody comes, it'll still just be me and Oren shooting the shit like we normally do. But hopefully we will have the opportunity to engage with some listeners and we can bring their thoughts on the book or on the podcast into the conversation. And I'm excited about that possibility.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Until then, though, I think we've done about as much damage as we can do for this episode. As always, I have been Todd Sullivan.
Have been Todd Sullivan.
You have
Is
not
that
been
proper?
Todd Sullivan.
Is that proper English?
I have been.
I have been Todd Sullivan. Yeah, I guess that is. It sounded weird. For some
And I
reason.
still am. I am Todd Sullivan.
And I'm Oren Barcher.
Thanks for listening. Go watch a fucking movie, I guess.